The traditional Christmas story tells us that Mary gave birth in a stable because there was no room for her and Joseph in the inn. We don't know much more than that, frankly, and in the absence of information, questions abound. Who was this innkeeper who refused a pregnant woman about to give birth? What kind of person would have made desperate travelers sleep in a stable? Well, today we explore the story of the innkeeper. Now, to begin, let me say that we don't really know much about the innkeeper. In fact, we don't even know for sure that there was one, though if there be an inn, there must surely have been an innkeeper. But Luke apparently didn't find it important enough to mention. He only tells us that the baby was born and laid in a manger because there was no room for them in the inn. Though not specifically mentioned in Luke's gospel, Christmas pageants often seem to have an innkeeper. When I was watching A Charlie Brown Christmas with Harry and Will Gray this week, I noticed that in their Christmas pageant, not only did they have an innkeeper played by Pigpen, but they also had an innkeeper's wife with naturally curly hair. The innkeeper intrigues us because his decision is pivotal to the story. What kind of innkeeper was he? Was he a Conrad Hilton type, wealthy and successful with a chain of inns all across the Holy Land? Oh, was he more of a Tom Bodett type, homey, affable, always leaving the light on for you? Was it a nice inn, or was it something more akin to a boarding house or a hostel? There are so many unanswered questions. Was there really no room in the inn, or just no room for poor people like Mary and Joseph? Was the innkeeper kind and sympathetic, or cold and unfeeling? Was the stable offered to them out of concern for the couple who would otherwise have no shelter from the weather? Or was it offered as the only place offering some level of privacy in an otherwise very crowded inn? Or was it offered out of a desire to make a few extra bucks off these desperate strangers? Fact is, we know nothing about the innkeeper or his motivation, and so our traditions have filled in the blanks. In some traditions, the innkeeper is a kindly soul who, due to circumstances beyond his control, has no choice but to turn the couple away. What is he supposed to do? Roust some other family from their room and give it to Mary and Joseph? But out of concern for them and a desire to help, he grants them access to the stable. When writing about the Good Samaritan later in his gospel, Luke tells us about just such a helpful innkeeper. Though we remember the Samaritan who stops to help the wounded traveler beside the road, the Samaritan is also helped by the kind innkeeper who agrees to care for the stricken traveler until he's well enough to go on his own way. So perhaps this tradition is close to the truth. Maybe it was just such a kindly innkeeper as this one that Mary and Joseph met that night. But some traditions cast the innkeeper as a miserly character, no doubt with a black hat and a mustache curled up at the ends, who gruffly informs the poor couple that there is no room for you. I guess there's just something about turning a pregnant woman away to give birth in a stable that makes it easy for us to see the one responsible as cold or unfeeling. Frederick Buechner envisioned the innkeeper as a simple businessman who was so busy with the tasks of caring for his guests that he simply missed the coming of his Lord and didn't even realize it. His sermon, entitled simply The Innkeeper, in it, Buechner writes this: do you know what it's like to run an inn, to run a business, a family, to run anything in this world for that matter, even your own life? It is like being lost in a forest of 1,000,000 trees, said the innkeeper. And each tree is a thing to be done. Is there fresh linen on all the beds? Did the children put on their coats before they went out? Has the letter been written, the book read? Is there money enough left in the bank? Today we have food. Today we have food in our bellies and clothes on our backs. But what can we do to make sure that we will still have them tomorrow? 1,000,000 trees, 1,000,000 things. Until finally we have eyes for nothing else, and whatever we see turns into a thing. The sparrow lying in the dust at your feet, just a thing to be kicked out of the way, not the mystery of death. The calling of children outside your window, just a distraction, an irrelevance, not life, not the wildest miracle of them all. Of course, I remember very well the evening they arrived. When the baby came, I was not there. I was lost in the forest somewhere. the unenchanted forest of a million trees. So when the baby came, I was not around, and I saw none of it. But this I do know, my own true love, all your life long you wait for your own true love to come. We, all of us do, our destiny, our joy, our heart's desire. So how am I to say it, gentlemen? When he came, I missed him. How often, like Buechner's Innkeeper, have we missed Christ in the busyness of our own lives? How often do we trade the miracles of life, the wonders of childhood, the mysteries of the world around us in exchange for one more hour at the office, one more dollar on the ledger, one more point on our GPA? The temptations of this season will be to use our precious time to prepare the perfect meal and to find the perfect gifts. We will burn the midnight oil studying for finals and burn the midday gasoline driving from mall to mall. We will do so much to make the holiday season special when all we really need to do is spend that time in the presence of the people that we love, listening, laughing, sharing the love of Christ through ourselves and not our things. In Frederick Buechner's imagination, the innkeeper was unwilling to be distracted from his tasks. But in my own mind, it is what the innkeeper did after the child's birth that is most interesting. For there is to come a visitation by numbers of shepherds wandering in from the fields, telling amazing tales of angels and newborn kings, and no innkeeper worth his salt would have let a group of shepherds just wander into his inn without investigating. Now, shepherds back then were considered to be a very sketchy lot, questionable of character. They were rough men who fought hard and drank hard and enjoyed the freedom of the open range. Their presence inspired nervousness in the most courageous of men, but in the innkeeper, they inspired outright fear. When they came, the innkeeper shrank back from the door. Peering through the corner of the front window, he watched them amble toward the inn amble around the inn towards the back, to where that poor young couple had much earlier bedded down in the stable for the night. The innkeeper's mind raced. Why had the shepherds come in from the fields? Were they drunk? Would they cause him trouble? And what about that young couple? Were they in danger? When he heard no ruckus from the stable, and when peering again through the glass, he noticed the young man welcomed them in, the innkeeper began to wonder about the couple. What manner of people were they to associate with shepherds, to consort with the dregs of society? What trouble had he brought upon himself by allowing these people of obviously questionable character to squat on his property for the night? As more shepherds gathered at the stable, the innkeeper summoned his courage and an old axe handle that he kept by the door, and ventured out into the courtyard to investigate. But what he heard there were not the sounds of drunken carousing, but rather the awed whispers and soft baby talk of grown men, and the gentle cooing of a newborn child. As he approached, the axe handle held shoulder high, ready to strike should the need arise. He gazed over the hulking shoulder of a shepherd into his own stable and saw it transformed by the presence of the mother and child, surrounded by these men who wrought such fear in his own heart, but who wanted only to see and to worship. Moved by the scene, he lowered the heavy implement, and letting it rest on the floor, he wondered at what could have brought these lowly people, this simple man and woman, this shady and disreputable lot of shepherds, and he himself, together in such a way. As he looked around the stable, glancing from the sleeping baby to the face of Mary, weary from labor, to the face of Joseph, beaming with pride, to the faces of the shepherds, filled with wonder at this thing which they had been called to witness, the innkeeper realized that each face reflected not only the light of the torches on the stable walls, but the image of God. And he knew then, as we must know now, that they had been brought together, this most unlikely group of people in this most unlikely of places, by the love of God in the midst of the life of this small child. born to bring light and life and hope to all men and women and children of every nation and every race and every creed. Forgetting his anxiety and his tasks yet undone, the innkeeper gently pushed his way into the stable and knelt down beside the manger to look upon the child. He knelt there shoulder to shoulder with people whose names and stories he did not know. Yet he did not feel afraid, and he did not feel like a stranger.